Okay, I'm David Solomanoff, the president of the New York chapter of the Internet Society. We're here today, May 21st, at LibTech NYC 2004, which is organized by the Internet Society of New York, RECLAIM, and one of our sponsors here is Hunter Newby of Allied Fiber. And I'll start out by saying Allied Fiber is not an internet provider. How would you exactly describe the types of services that you provide?
Well, first, thank you very much for having me here. It's a pleasure, as always, and I appreciate the New York Internet Society. Right. So Allied Fiber is a neutral infrastructure provider for network operators. So essentially, we provide dark fiber on a long-haul superstructure that links to submarine cable landing stations in the United States, and that's integrated with our own neutral co-location facilities for physical layer interconnection that are spaced approximately every 60 miles on the system. So it's network neutral infrastructure, physical layer, for any network operator.
Right. So you could, if you were an ISP, you could run the internet over your infrastructure, but you could do video, telephone, or invent some new cool thing and just lease the access to your facilities and just do it.
That's correct.
Right.
So basically, we're providing, to make an analogy, everyone their own lane on the highway so that they can provision whatever kind of car, whatever color, whatever size, whatever number of people they want to run in that any cargo. And that, to us, that's not our business. We're just a landlord. We're in the real estate business, essentially.
Okay. And it's kind of a long story, so we won't take the whole thing, but you got into this from your previous business of running carrier hotels, I guess. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. My prior company was called Telex. We started that business in the late 90s, 2000, here in New York at 60 Hudson Street, which is a very important carrier hotel. And then over time, Telex, we acquired 56 Marietta Street, which is the carrier hotel in Atlanta, Georgia, that really holds the whole world together. And then we exited that business to a private equity firm, which I stayed with for a little while to continue to lead strategy. We acquired the Meet Me rooms in 10 Digital Realty Trust properties across the United States. And then I left in March of 2008, and in June of 2008 I founded Allied Fiber, which was based on me listening to all of my customers, most of which are international network operators and a lot of large domestics. And their biggest issue at the time, each of them sort of independently speaking to me as they always did, they were telling me that they were having issues finding dark fiber in the United States that they could buy and own and light themselves. That was 7 years ago. Today the problem is compounded with fiber exhaust, some routes that just have never been built that need to be built for diversity or redundancy, technological obsolescence of the aging cables, underlying dirt rights of those systems that are in jeopardy. They're going to expire. They need to be renewed. There's some questions about that. The lack of neutrality, meaning all the fiber in the U.S. that's long haul is owned by carriers. So then by default they compete with the others, so they're not very friendly. And the lack of any neutral co-location facilities that are integrated into that long-haul fiber for the purposes of each independent network operator having their own equipment for amplification, regeneration, and subrates. So knowing that, I created the physical layer business model for Allied Fiber. I secured a right-of-way agreement with Norfolk Southern Railroad, which is effectively 35 years from when we started, and began to build new duct and tie that together with existing duct. And most recently, last year, we purchased a duct from the Florida East Coast Railroad from Miami to Jacksonville, and we proceeded to place a 528-count Corning cable in that duct, and we built 6 of our buildings. They're 1,200 square foot modular precast concrete buildings. So those buildings are all in, and the cable is now in between Miami and Jacksonville, and that's really the first leg of our national build to connect the submarine cable landing regions in the United States.
The final game plan will be to have totally a coast-to-coast to the subsea landing points which connect to other continents.
Correct.
That's the game plan.
The subsea cables that already exist land in what I call the cable landing regions of the United States. So sort of the New York, New Jersey area, the southern Florida, and now Jacksonville has 2 new cables.
And on the West Coast, where are they?
The Pacific Northwest, sort of the Seattle, Portland, and then down in the LA, SoCal region. And some places there's already fiber in a landing station, some places not. But the one thing that's clearly missing is a neutral physical layer platform that links those that has the design like Allied Fiber, which provides handhold access on a very incremental basis. In Florida, it's every 5,000 feet. and everywhere else it's 3,000 feet, which is sort of a vestige of some of the existing infrastructure that we bought. The handholds are for lateral splices. So there's a lot of metro, regional, muni networks that already exist. So they cross our route. And they'll splice into us to get to cell towers and towns. And
so you're bringing them together so that you have the type of connectivity that you would have within a city eventually globally.
The way I see the United States, it's one metro. And I see cities as individual buildings in that metro. And our handholds are like manholes. So basically people access the system in the handholds, and we have our own neutral colos, which are akin to a carrier hotel meet-me room, and they're every 60 miles. And that's it.
Right. So how far are you along in terms of constructing the complete the full network across the coast to coast?
We've placed the cable through Florida, so we're connecting in numerous submarine cable landing stations presently, and we're provisioning fibers, and we're getting that whole thing turned on now. So as I said, we built 6 buildings in Florida. We've built about half of the route in Georgia between Jacksonville and Atlanta, and we'll proceed with that and continue that over the next several months, hopefully by the beginning of next year. And we've got already reserved the rights to about 1,200 miles of duct between New York, Chicago, and Ashburn, Virginia, which is the sort of center of the internet here in the eastern part of the United States. We'll place the cable in there and add buildings there, which will take another, multiple months. And then we need to connect Ashburn to Atlanta, which will then connect the transatlantic to the LATAM, South American subsea systems, and then we need to move west. This doesn't exist outside of where we've built it, and it needs to. So the question is how quickly we can get to it, and that really comes down to time and money. And it's really about capital at this point. It's very difficult to raise money in this environment for a variety of different reasons until you have proof of concept and you're sort of an entity that everyone says, oh, okay, that's going to work. You have cash flows, and they can give you EBITDA multiples, whatever. The fact of the matter is this is going to be a multi-billion-dollar build. But because we're doing it, it alleviates the burden of all the other network operators to have to do it. And really, ultimately, all they want are maybe 4 fibers. And we're building multiple ducts and hundreds of fibers, so we sort of have an economies of scale aggregation play, if you will.
Right. Now, your policy, we discussed this when you gave me a tour of your facility down on Hudson Street. But your policy is never to sell all your capacity to one provider so that it remains open and neutral. Am I right about that?
That's correct. Yeah, effectively, if we sold all of our fiber to one network operator, then we wouldn't have a neutral interconnection business. And really, there is no reason why a single network operator would want to come to us and buy all the fibers that we've built, because they don't necessarily have a need for all of it. We've seen some pretty high count requests from RBOX and whatnot for multiple ribbons. But aside from that, we're talking about hundreds of strands of fiber, which, by the way, that won't last forever. Even selling them 2, 4, 6 at a time, there are more than enough network operators out there that ultimately will demand what we have as a physical product. So what we seek are multiple ducts. So we can place a high count cable today and sell ribbons at a time. And our colo facilities are modular for a reason. As the equipment's deployed to light the fibers that we're provisioning, then more equipment's necessary, we add a new building.
So, but the new building would be next to the old building, right?
Yeah, they're modular and they're incrementally grown. And then over time, those points of interconnection, which really resemble the meet-me room, sort of the layer 1, 2, dense wave, Ethernet, core router, interconnect, those will be the locations or somewhere nearby where the data center element, different type of real estate, will want to reside. So modular data centers will appear and append themselves to the Allied Fiber system. And that's how you'll get distributed cloud, CDN and things like that, where people want to do edge caching to optimize latency and throughput so that they don't have to stretch it all the way on the backbone. Our platform is built to do that. It's physical layer, and we're in a sense agnostic to it, but obviously we encourage all of it. And I know inherently that all these things need to exist. It just needs a place, so we become the where.
Right. So I guess that's where we're coming to the final point here, is that you're becoming the where. The big breakthrough, and one of the big breakthroughs, was for you to actually get the right of way through the railroads, because that typically is a very, very complicated issue where you might need to get the right of way through different municipalities and things like that. But once you made that initial deal with Norfolk Western?
Southern, yeah.
Southern, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I knew it was in one direction. That was kind of the big breakthrough that made the whole thing possible, I guess.
That's correct.
Right.
Yeah, so I met the Norfolk Southern Railroad guys, one guy in particular, George Eichelberger, when I was at Telex and acquired 56 Marietta Streets. That was in May of 2004. That started the relationship, and we worked together as making Norfolk Southern and one of their entities a tenant of mine in 56 Marietta Street. And I studied their network map, what they call the system, which is the right-of-way, and the duct map, so the interduct that they had put in some portions of their dirt right-of-way over a period of years. And to me, that empty duct represented the potential for a new neutral interconnection system. So it took, after all the years of knowing them and having them as a tenant and a partner, it still took, after Allied Fiber was launched, 18 months to negotiate and execute the agreement. So it takes a while. And then after that, the relationship requires capital. So it's capital intensive. But to secure the rights, I mean, to have one landlord that gets me from, basically from New York to Chicago to Jacksonville, one landlord, that's pretty important.
Right. So they were really interested in doing what you were doing, so they were pretty, I guess, in the end, happy that you were able to lease their infrastructure and make use of it, basically.
Correct. You see, we fill a very special void in the national network infrastructure. So there's right-of-way, dirt right-of-way, and then there's network operators. And then there's us. And in between, there has to be someone like us who essentially perfects right-of-way or improves it to the point where it's usable by network operators. All the network operator really wants are 4 fibers and a rack in every colo with some power. And they need it secure, and they need it, functionally air conditioning, and shipping and receiving, and a business process. It would be like saying to someone, you need a car to go to the store and buy, groceries and come home, but you have to build your own car. There's I don't want to build my own car. I just want to buy a car or rent a car, or I just want to call Uber and have a car get me and take me there and bring me back. So we play the role of that entity that has a neutral business model inherent. So we created the neutral roles, way back when during the Telex days. I've carried that forward into Allied Fiber, and I know that it works. I know that the network operators want it. They trust us, and we embed that trust in our agreements. We sign 20-year agreements, and we provision their services. We don't charge any monthly recurring cross-connect fees, which is more of a product marketing thing, but if you're from the industry, you understand what that means. And it's very important. And, we've sort of filled that void so that other people don't have to sit there and figure out how they're going to raise all this money to build this infrastructure. Right.
So, of course, you're looking for, now that you're up and running, looking for more customers. What other kinds of collaboration, partnerships, or sponsorships or investment are you looking for at this point?
Well, there's a whole host of different things.
Okay, that's good. I'm asking.
Yeah, it's a good question. Always looking for right-of-way partners, but pretty much railroads. I'm always looking for existing duct that's in the ground, but on a route segment that is particular to the Allied Fiber superstructure. But I am interested in seeing where other things are, because I can then refer that to someone else who's looking for that particular region. It'll accelerate them. I actually encourage people to take our model and copy it. Just do it in all the places where we're not going, because we're not going to do the whole country. We don't build to the home. We don't build to buildings and towers and things like that. Other people will do that. So we look for those assets. We're forging relationships with optical equipment vendors. We're allowing them to install their equipment in our system and trial the latest and greatest 100 gig, 400 gig, terabit, what have you, systems. Obviously, customers, we do a lot of marketing. We create our own events, and we partner with others to spread the word. Exactly, like you guys. So I'm always looking for a way to get the word out. So once again, thanks for this. And everything, a lot, raising capital, constantly raising money. Always looking for
investors.
Yeah, well, yes, looking for investors, looking for lower cost of capital, access to greater sources of capital, people that are sort of long-term patient money, because this is obviously going to take a while. And,
that's interesting.
And I have great investors today that have been very patient.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, well, considering how the rest of the world is, typically,
There's a lot of hot money, but then people have very unreasonable expectations.
Correct. We picked probably the biggest project that I could think of, but it's the biggest gaping hole in the United States infrastructure. There are a lot of other countries that already have implementations like this, and they're better off for it, but their benefit is that they're much smaller countries. So the capital plan and the time frame to get it done is a lot shorter. They're better off now that they have it, but the impact to GDP growth for them will be less than it will be for the United States when this is complete.
Okay, great. Well, thanks very much for your support here, and we're glad to support what you're doing because it really is as we were talking before we started the interview, this is the kind of the raw infrastructure that everything needs to build on in terms of our advocacy for open source and open content and,
yes.
and all that. You need to have that actual access to that infrastructure and be able to control it and have the freedom to do what you want with it, and that's what it all starts with. So thanks again.
Thank you.